Kinshade Stories family, I'm glad you're here because what I'm about to share has not left my mind since it happened. She walked into my office on a Thursday afternoon in late October, and the first thing I noticed was that she was carrying a manila folder. It was thick, stuffed so full the edges were bent. She sat down across from me, set the folder on her lap, and then she looked at me and said, I need you to help me understand how a person can love someone for 31 years and never actually know them. I didn't say anything right away. I waited. She pressed both hands flat on top of that folder, like she was keeping something inside it from escaping. And then she told me that her mother had died 3 weeks earlier, and at the reading of the will, in a lawyer's office in downtown Tulsa, in a room with beige carpet and a water cooler in the corner, she had discovered that she had a brother. Not a half-brother, not a distant relative, a full biological brother, same mother, same father, born 14 months before her, a brother her parents had given away before she was born, and then never, not once, not in 31 years of her life, mentioned. Not a word, not a hint, not a single photograph. He had simply been erased, and she had grown up as an only child believing that completely, never questioning it, while somewhere out there a man who shared her blood was living his own life, a life her family had deliberately made invisible. Before I go further, I want to say something important. Every situation I share on this channel comes from real clinical work, but every story is also unique. Please don't take what you hear today as a universal truth about grief, family, or identity. If something in this story touches something in your own life, I encourage you to speak with a licensed therapist or counselor who can give you the specific support you deserve. Rosalind was 43 years old when she came to see me. She lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she had grown up and where she had stayed, partly by choice and partly, as we would later discover together, because she had never fully felt free to leave. She was a middle school librarian, divorced, no children. She had a small house on a quiet street, a cat named Walter, and by her own description, a life that was fine but kind of hollow. She had been in therapy once before, briefly in her early 30s after the divorce. She said she stopped going because she felt like she had run out of things to talk about. She was calm when she sat across from me, composed, but her hands never stopped moving, smoothing the folder, straightening the edges, pressing down on it again. That folder was doing a lot of work for her. She told me her mother's name was Beverly. Her father, Gerald, had passed away 7 years earlier. Beverly had died of a stroke, quickly, without warning, which meant there had been no deathbed conversation, no explanation, no moment where Rosalind could have asked questions and gotten answers directly from the source. Everything she now knew, she had learned from a lawyer she had never met before, in a room she had never been in before, surrounded by paperwork she had never seen before. The brother's name was Thomas. The will acknowledged him by name and left him a small sum. Not much, Rosalind said, but enough to make the omission undeniable. The lawyer had his contact information. He had already been notified. He knew about Rosalind, and this was the part that made her hands press hardest on that folder. Thomas had apparently known for years. He had known he was adopted. He had known the names of his biological parents. He had at some point looked into it. He had found out about Rosalind, and he had made the decision not to reach out. He had chosen on his own to leave it alone. So she was sitting across from me carrying two losses at once. Her mother was gone, and a version of her own life, the life she thought she had lived, was gone too. She said, I was an only child. That was just a fact about me. The way some people are tall or left-handed. I was an only child, and now I find out that was never true. It was just something they decided to tell me. I asked her what she felt when the lawyer read Thomas's name. She thought about that for a moment. She said, nothing at first. I thought there was a mistake. I actually said out loud, "Who is Thomas?" And the lawyer looked at me like he wasn't sure how much to say. She laughed a little. It wasn't a happy laugh. She said, "He's your brother." And I remember thinking, he's using the wrong word. That's not the right word. That word belongs to a different kind of situation. She went home that evening and did not call anyone. She sat in her kitchen and tried to think of every conversation she had ever had with her mother about family, every question she might have asked as a child or as an adult, and every answer her mother had given her. She was trying to find the edges of the lie. How far did it go? How carefully had it been maintained? She thought about family photos, about holidays, about Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and long summer drives, and the hundreds of ordinary moments that made up 31 years of her life. Her mother had been in almost all of them, and in none of them, not once, not in 31 years of her life, Beverly had ever slipped. Not once had she looked at her daughter and given anything away. That kind of sustained omission is not a small thing. It takes effort. It takes consistency. It takes a decision made over and over again every single day to keep a person out of sight. I have worked with patients who have kept secrets. Everyone has kept secrets. But to keep a secret from your own child about a sibling, a living, breathing person who exists in the world for more than 30 decades without cracking, that requires something more than just staying quiet. It requires a daily recommitment to a version of reality that you know is not true. She opened the folder on her lap and showed me what was inside. She had printed everything she could find: public records, census data, an old graduation announcement she had found in an archived local newspaper from a town about 2 hours outside Tulsa. Thomas's name, his age, his school. There was also a photograph, printed from what looked like a social media profile. She handed it to me carefully, like it was fragile. He was standing in front of a truck in a driveway. He looked like her, not in a dramatic, movie-like way, just the jaw was similar, the way he was standing. She had looked at this photograph more times than she could count, and she still didn't know what she felt when she saw it. I asked her what she wanted from therapy. She said, "I want to understand why she did it, and I want to know if it changes who I am." That second question was the one that mattered most. Identity is built on narrative. We construct our sense of self from the stories we tell about our lives, who we come from, what shaped us, what is ours. When a foundational piece of that narrative is revealed to be false, the whole structure shakes. Not because you are actually different, but because the story you used to explain yourself no longer fits. She had spent 43 years as an only child. That had shaped everything: how she related to people, how she moved through the world, what she expected from relationships. She had always been slightly self-contained, slightly better at being alone than most people she knew. She had thought that was just her personality. Now she was wondering, was it something else? Had she been shaped, without knowing it, by an absence she didn't even know was there? We spent several sessions working through what psychologists call ambiguous loss. It's a term developed by Dr. Pauline Boss to describe grief over something that doesn't have clear edges, a loss that can't be fully mourned because it's not fully defined. Rosalind was grieving her mother, but she was also grieving a relationship that never existed. She was grieving Thomas, not the man himself, but the brother she never got to have. She was grieving the childhood she thought she'd had, and the one she actually had, and the difference between the two. And she was grieving the version of her mother she had believed in. Beverly, the woman she had known, was real. She had loved that woman. But Beverly had also been someone who could make a choice like this and hold it without flinching. Both of those things were true at the same time, and Rosalind had to find a way to hold them both. This is one of the hardest things in grief work. We want our loved ones to be uncomplicated. We want to be able to miss them cleanly. But real people are not clean. Real people are capable of love and deception at the same time. Beverly had not been a bad mother. By every account Rosalind gave me, she had been warm and present and involved. But she had also done something that I would describe as a profound failure of trust. Not because she gave Thomas up for adoption. That decision, made long before Rosalind was born, happened in a context I don't fully know and cannot judge.
but because she never told Rosalind he existed. That silence was a choice, made again and again and again. About 6 weeks into our work together, Rosalind told me she had decided to contact Thomas. She had written a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which I thought said a lot about how seriously she was taking this. She had rewritten it 4 times. She showed me the final version. It was short, 2 paragraphs. She said she was not looking for anything specific. She just wanted him to know she was not angry at him, that she understood he had made his own decisions, and that if he ever wanted to talk, she was open to it. She mailed it on a Tuesday morning, and then spent the next 2 weeks in a kind of suspended state, not anxious exactly, just waiting. She described it as like the moment right before a phone rings, except it lasted 14 days. He wrote back. He had not expected her to reach out, he said. He had spent years telling himself she probably didn't know about him and probably didn't want to. He had convinced himself that reaching out would cause more harm than good. He had built a very logical, very clean explanation for why staying silent was actually the generous thing to do. He had sat with that explanation for so long that it started to feel like a decision made for her sake rather than his own. I recognized that immediately when Rosalind read me parts of his letter. It's a very common form of what we call cognitive distortion, specifically rationalization. When we want to avoid something uncomfortable, we build a narrative that makes the avoidance sound like a virtue. Thomas wasn't protecting Rosalind. He was protecting himself from the discomfort of possible rejection, but he had dressed it up as consideration.
The twist, and I mean this carefully because it reframed everything Rosalind had brought to me in that first session, was that Thomas had actually contacted Beverly years earlier. He had found her, he had written to her, and Beverly had written back. They had exchanged letters for almost a year. Beverly had told Thomas about Rosalind, had described her, had told him she was well, that she had a good life, that she was loved. And then Beverly had asked Thomas, gently by his account, but clearly, to respect the life she had built and not reach out to Rosalind directly. She had not wanted her daughter's life disrupted. She had thought she was protecting her. She had managed Thomas, managed the situation, and then apparently managed to die before any of it surfaced. When Rosalind understood this, she went very still. I mean physically still. She stopped adjusting her sleeves, she stopped touching the arm of the chair, she just sat there. And then she said, she knew he was out there, she knew he knew about me, and she still never said a word. That was the moment the omission became fully visible. Beverly hadn't just kept an old secret, she had actively maintained it, in real time, through a real correspondence with a real person. And still, to Rosalind, there had been nothing, just silence. I want to be clear about what I said to Rosalind in that moment, because it mattered. I did not tell her how to feel. I did not tell her that her mother was wrong, even though I had opinions. I asked her what she needed. She said she needed to understand if it was possible to love someone and still feel betrayed by them. I told her yes, absolutely yes, that love and betrayal are not opposites. They can live in the same heart at the same time. Grief is not a single feeling, it is a landscape, and she was allowed to move through it in whatever direction she needed. As her therapist, I explained to her that what she was experiencing had all the hallmarks of what we call complicated grief, a form of mourning where the loss is entangled with unresolved emotions like anger, confusion, or betrayal, making it harder to process than what we might call clean grief. Together, we looked at the different layers of what she was carrying: her mother's death, Thomas's existence, Beverly's active management of the truth, Thomas's own years of silence, and the version of her own life she had believed in and now had to revise. We talked about something I come back to often in my work: the difference between understanding a decision and accepting it. You can understand why someone made a choice, their fear, their context, their limited options, without being required to accept that the choice was right.
Rosalind did not have to forgive her mother to survive this. She did not have to make Beverly's decision make sense. What she had to do was find a way to carry both the love and the wound without one canceling the other out. I reminded her that her identity was not undone by this discovery. The 43 years she had lived were real. The experiences were real. The person she had become through them was real. A new fact does not erase a life. It adds to it. It complicates it, but it does not delete it. She had not become a different person the moment she heard Thomas's name in that lawyer's office. She had just been handed more truth than she was prepared for. She and Thomas eventually met in person, a coffee shop halfway between Tulsa and where he lived. She told me about it the following week. She said it was strange and ordinary at the same time. He looked like her around the eyes. They had the same way of pausing before they answered a question. They had both ordered black coffee without talking about it. She said, "I don't know if we'll be close. I don't know if that's even possible at this point." But sitting across from him, I kept thinking, you were always real. You were always out there, and I just didn't know. She didn't cry when she said it. She just looked out the window for a moment, and then she looked back at me. She said, "I think I'm going to be okay. I just need to figure out what okay looks like now." That is the work. Not resolution, not a clean ending, just the slow, steady process of building a new understanding of your own story, with all the pieces included this time. I want to leave you with a question today, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about your family, something that was kept from you, whether intentionally or not, that changed the way you understood your own life? Not necessarily something this dramatic. It could be something smaller, a decision that was made for you that you never got a say in, a truth that arrived too late. I ask because this kind of thing is more common than people realize, and the pain of it, the particular pain of learning that your story was being edited without your knowledge, is something that deserves to be spoken out loud. So if that's something you've lived, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what it was like. You don't have to share everything, just what you're willing to say. And if today's story touched something in you, please leave a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need to hear these stories. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I put a lot into every case I share here, and I want to make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being a part of the Kinshade Stories community. This work means everything to me, and I'll see you in the next one.